In 2004, the Hawks finished second last. Only percentage prevented them from claiming the wooden spoon. In the summer of that year, they named Port Adelaide assistant Alastair Clarkson as their head coach. Fast forward just 4 years, and Clarkson delivered the Hawks their first premiership in 17 years, a triumphant upset of the all-conquering Cats. His masterpiece as a coach came shortly afterwards, engineering a three-peat of premierships in 2013, 14 and 15 that elevated he and his side to legend status. Widely regarded as the best coach of the modern era, his time at Hawthorn will come to an end in the most unedifying of circumstances. The beginning of the end came with a hastily announced succession plan by President Jeff Kennett. Clarkson would coach next season before handing the team over to 2008 Premiership captain Sam Mitchell. Today, that plan fell apart. In the middle of a training session, word filtered out that the Hawks would part ways with Clarkson at the end of the season, bringing the Clarkson era at Hawthorn to a swift and messy end.
I've consistently said I want Alastair there. Very, very natural meeting, not a mediation meeting, a meeting, as I said, that's been planned to work out what their responsibilities are going to be over the next, 18 months.
I'm told that during that meeting it became clear that Sam Mitchell would rather have clean air to have a fresh start next year without Alastair Clarkson by his side.
Now we're being told a week later he's saying I want him out. I don't know that to be true, right? If it is, Sam Mitchell's the wrong man to coach Hawthorn.
My commitment to Sam Mitchell is through to the end of next year. That commitment is to Sam, it's his commitment to Lyndall, his wife, and to his 3 children in Smith, Scarlett and Emerson. And if it's my turn now to try to help him be a senior coach, I'll see through my commitment. I've always been that way.
Is there any circumstance you can foresee in which you're coaching Hawthorn next year without Alastair at the club?
No. I've worked with Clarko for nearly 20 years. The fact that people would say that I'm trying to push him out is disrespectful to both of us, because we've had a working relationship for such a long period of time that I did get a little bit frustrated with people saying, oh, he's just trying to get Clarkson out.
Is there another code in the world that would sack a guy that's the finished product? He's the best we've got. He's the best we've seen.
Clarko's moral obligation to Hawthorn is now broken because Hawthorn have broken it.
Knowing you're giving up the best coach of the modern era, who I think still has plenty of currency, you're placing a lot of faith and pressure on Sam Mitchell.
My view is it's a mess, and I don't think it was a good idea.
The purpose of our announcement today is to let you all know that I'm going to step aside from coaching the Hawthorn Footy Club at the end of this year.
You've been sacked by the Hawthorn.
What's going on, Clarko?
Thanks, guys.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Friday Night Footy on Fox. Thanks to the mighty Ford Ranger. There's been some big days in footy over the past few years, but none quite like this, I don't think. The most successful coach of recent times will be no longer a Hawthorn Footy Club coach beyond the next 4 weeks, despite all of the assurances that we've been placed over the last month or so. We're going to speak to Dunstall, we're going to speak to Dixon, we're going to speak to Dermot Brereton, all the big names, as well as these two, Jonathan Brown, Nick Riewoldt, and we'll get to the big games in Kilda and Carlton. It's just been pushed back a little bit, but understandably so, on the back of this genuine bombshell news today.
It's been huge, Gary. Good evening, boys. I was looking forward to dressing up for Retro Round.
Not today, Johnny.
It's been shelved after the news. This is bigger news we've seen in football for a long time, no doubt about it. I'm not surprised, though. Honestly, I'm not surprised. I thought from the time that it happened, I thought, how is this going to play out? If I'm a player, if I'm a current Hawthorn player, Nick, how is this going to go? Because at the end of the day, that's the only audience that matters.
Yeah, well, you look back on everything that's occurred now over the past 26 days, and it's hard to believe anything. So many definitive statements, so many massive statements made by people perceived to be on the outside who clearly had information about what was bubbling away on the inside. I mean, our very own Tom Morris was pretty strong on this from the start and was shouted down, was belittled by the Hawthorn president, Jeff Kennett. Turns out that they were all on the money, and the people making the super strong definitive statements are the ones with egg on their face, and that's people within the Hawthorn Football Club.
Well, when you say you're not surprised, on the back of Alastair Clarkson's performance last Friday, where he stood in front of that media pack for 14 minutes.
Not last week. When Alastair Clarkson came out last week and you go, well, geez, he must be serious. But at the time, we go back, what was it, 3 weeks ago, guys?
No, that's right. I guess, and I think we all, well, you guys certainly did. I was more bullish about the fact that this would be pushed through, and the people you speak about, Tom Morris and Caroline Wilson and Sam McClure, did cop a lot. And I also challenged them on it, because when I see Alastair Clarkson banging the table, talking about his relationships and how invested he is in this football club, I said, how can he not be there? And here we are a week later, and the last thing you heard on that was the first thing he said at that press conference today: I'm here to tell you I won't be coaching next year.
There's no egg on Alastair Clarkson's face. No, absolutely not.
Well, we need to find out exactly how you can go from giving a rock-solid, cast-iron, pull at the heartstring assurance that you don't break a contract to today saying, oh, yeah, we need to give him some clear air so we can make it work. I mean, that's a fair leap in the space of 7 days.
It is. There are also a number of reasons why it might have shifted so dramatically.
But you were adamant Wednesday night, as of Wednesday night, Gaz, and you know him a lot better than we do.
I haven't spoken to him.
I know you haven't spoken to him, but you were adamant, from what you were hearing around the industry, that he was still coaching the Hawthorn Football Club next year.
On the back of what we've been through for the past week, there's probably only 3 I'd listen to in terms of what we're hearing from the industry, and it's Caroline Wilson, Sam McClure. It's hard sometimes. You've got to suck it up and take your medicine and congratulate those people, and also Tommy Morris. So they're the only ones who seem to be accurate on the back of this.
So the big question then to come out of today is, how did we get from a situation where 26 days ago Hawthorn talk about a succession plan, they panic, they flinch because Collingwood have a vacancy. They're worried about losing Sam Mitchell. Maybe they want Clarko gone. Ultimately, we don't know. How do we go from a situation where if they had have said to Clarko, you're done at the end of next year, or you're done now and you can walk away and we'll pay you the 1.2, he would have taken that in a heartbeat, you would suggest. How do we go from there to now, where all of a sudden he's not seeing through his contract and he's still getting paid? That's the question.
That is the question that needs to be answered. Maybe this man might be able to hold your thoughts, might be able to help us out. Of course, he is the man that appointed Alastair Clarkson in the face of some fierce opposition, it has to be said at the time as well. Jason Dunstall on duties at the Marvel Stadium tonight. Chief, thanks for giving us a couple of minutes of your time. What was your immediate reaction when you heard the news today?
Rather surprised, Gaz, when the messages started to come through this morning and then the story became a lot clearer. Very surprised, given what we've heard over the last few weeks, but whichever way you look at it, it hasn't been handled well by the club.
When you say a lot clearer, can you help us out here? Because it still seems muddy to me, given what we've heard over the past 7 days.
Well, when you say clear, all I'm saying is it's come to a head today, hasn't it? So I suspect if they had their time again, they would have done this 3 weeks ago. They tried to play it out, and maybe, if I read between the lines, perhaps there's a financial component involved here in terms of the payout and what impact that has on next year's salary cap, soft cap. So that makes things very difficult as well. But, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to rip the Band-Aid off, you rip it off quickly. You don't take it off bit by bit. And that, to me, is what they've been doing over the last couple of weeks. So it's been messy. I think it's been embarrassing, but at least now they can get on with it.
Chief, you've been an integral part of the Hawthorn Footy Club. You've been on the board there, CEO, an integral part of getting Alastair Clarkson to the club. How could the board not foresee this 3 weeks ago when they're sitting there thinking we're effectively about to sack arguably the greatest coach in the modern era, yet he's not going to dig his heels in and stay for the $1.2 million and catch, and cause some problems potentially?
Well, I think we're all guessing at numbers, so let's leave the number out of the equation for the moment. It's a difficult one. So they obviously believe that Sam Mitchell is the long-term future of the club as coach, and that's fine if that's your belief. To sit there and say, well, then for that to happen, we have to move Clarko out of the club, that makes life very, very difficult, doesn't it? So we've seen handovers in recent years. None of them have worked. This one hasn't worked. It's been messy, but if they think that maybe Clarko could have coached for a few more years, but he wasn't going to be there long term, and they didn't want to lose Sam Mitchell, who they think is going to be the long-term coach, I guess they made this move. But it does put a lot of pressure on Mitch, and I hope he does okay.
Jace, we always talk about great clubs not finding themselves in situations like this, and Hawthorn have been a great club. But for you to label the goings-on embarrassing, what does that say to you about the decision makers at the Hawthorn Football Club currently?
Well, what that says to me really is when you talk about great clubs, clubs can be great for periods of time, but every club goes through problems, they go through pitfalls, they go through periods where they're not doing well on field, they're not doing well off field, and clearly this hasn't been handled very, very well by those that are in the know at Hawthorn, the ones that need to be delivering the communication. I don't think everyone's been on the same page. They needed to just bite the bullet early on. And the other thing is, I think what's really disappointing is when you see information leaking out of a footy club. That to me is when you know you've got problems going on. So maybe a fresh start's what they need.
Last one, Jace, we know you've got to get back to your commitments. Is Jeff Kennett's future at that footy club in any doubt now?
Oh, I would never guess or never make any sort of prognostications about what Jeff might do. Jeff has always done what Jeff's wanted to do. So he was the one that was a big believer in having terms for how long you can serve at a club in specific roles, and I think he probably felt that Alastair was coming to the end of his term. What that means for Jeff, I don't know. Maybe he wants to see a transition and then maybe hand it over to someone else, or maybe he wants to stay there. I'm not quite sure. Gaz, as you know, that's a question you'll have to get straight from the horse's mouth.
And we will if we could. But last one, how do you think he's handled it?
I think they've all handled it in pretty ordinary fashion. Yeah. I don't think anyone has come out of it smelling like roses, put it that way.
Appreciate your time, Jace. As you said,
fellas.
we know you're busy with other commitments. Ben Dixon, Dermot Brereton to come.
You're close with Clarko. Has this rocked your faith in the Hawthorn Football Club?
I love Hawthorn. I seriously do. And I don't know who to believe right now. I seriously do. I sat there today, you know, I going to bat for them. I thought that this was something you guys didn't think at work. I have this faith in Clarkson to be able to put his imprimatur on a group and have Mitchell fall into line. I still believe Mitchell was prepared to coach underneath Alastair. I still think Alastair was prepared to coach into next year. Clearly something's happened. I don't know what it is, Nick, and until such times you sit down with him and speak with him, you've got to work it out. So there's been strong opinions, as we've said, strong opinions of people who speak to people at the Hawthorn Footy Club. Ben Dixon's one of those, one of our own here at Fox Footy, was very passionate in his defence of Alastair Clarkson and Hawthorn only a week or so ago on the back of some of the reporting. He's been good enough to join us. Dicko, welcome to you. Your first response.
I was surprised, Gary, like Jason. Woke up to 44 missed calls and what's happened to your football club, but I think the club was probably more surprised than anything. Last week we saw him on Friday come out and just lay it on the line and said that he was going to stick around for his contract and play it out and obviously support Sam. And I think over the last 4 days that's changed dramatically, and I think it's caught the club on the back foot. And I think it's purely Alastair's decision to say that he needs to give clear air to the club. So I think it's Al's call, and he's made it, and he probably come to a realisation either at the back of the weekend or early in the week that it's probably best in the interest of Clarko and the club that he severs the ties in a way, because the club certainly weren't going to do that, and they were going to stick by him and support him. And I know for a fact that Sam Mitchell was excited about the opportunity next year to have Clarko there the whole time. So he might have gone away and had a deep think about the impression that he's going to have on Sam next year, and give him some clear air to obviously coach Hawthorn.
So Dicko, if that's the case, if you're saying Alastair's initiated this separation, why would the Hawthorn Football Club be obliged to pay him then?
Not obliged to pay him, Rui. I just think that they've come to a mutual agreement. So one thing Clarko is a legend of that football club. I know that he's highly respected throughout the footy club, so we know there's been so much external noise that everyone thinks there's a big crack within the footy club, but I think they would have come to an agreement and a respectful one, because, like Jason said, this has been handled poorly across the board. So the only way to get this clean, cut it clean and move on is Alastair gets paid out, gets his settlement, which he's entitled to from a contract. He's putting the best interests of the club forward, and I think that's how it's played out, really, to be brutally honest. So I don't think he was holding the club to ransom in any way, shape or form. I just think they've come to a mutual agreement, and that's the settlement.
Dicko, you're very strong in your criticism of Carolyn Wilson last week, where she reported on the mediation session between Sam Mitchell and Alastair Clarkson. Reportedly, Sam Mitchell said that he wanted clear air, effectively wanting Clarko gone from next year onwards.
Yeah, well, that's 100% false, and I'll stand by what I said last Friday, albeit it was pretty animated. Caroline Wilson said it was mediation. It wasn't mediation, and Sam wanted clear air, which was totally untrue. That was never discussed in that meeting. So She's got a lot right, because I'll put up my hand and say I said he was going to stick around and took him on his word that he was going to coach out next year, and I refuted everyone that said that they wouldn't. And she came out and she was adamant that he wasn't coaching next year. So credit to Caroline, 100% right, and that's journalism for you. Sometimes there's a little grey in your areas, but she's got this 100% right.
Last one, Dicko. So I just want to get this clear. So Alastair Clarkson last Friday, 13, 14, 15 minutes, sat there, I watched it, I heard it. He talked about, the tragedy of his losing brothers and brothers-in-laws and commitments, and spoke about it like a marriage, how he'd never walk out on a contract. So now you're telling us that in the space of, you think by Monday maybe this occurred to him, that in the space of 3 or 4 days he's had that change of heart from that Friday to that Monday.
I haven't spoken to him, Gaz, and you know him as well as I do. So it's a fairly big assumption that, I know that the club definitely haven't called this to a head, and Alastair, I reckon, and knowing him and sticking up for him last week, saying I believe exactly what he was saying, I reckon he's come to the realisation that it's in the best interest of the footy club that Sam takes over. So that's his view, his opinion, and I reckon he's following that through, and he's brought it to a head sooner rather than later.
Good on you, Dicko. Appreciate you putting the head up tonight. Good to hear from you.
That's a great question, though, because I think is it irrelevant, or do you think we, as in the football public and the Hawthorn members, deserve to know?
I just watched that, right? Yeah. And I looked at that man, and I know, his pride and his sense
of... You mean Clarko on Friday? Yeah. I'm hearing you.
The sense of his word and, the emotion behind it.
It's a big shift.
I looked at that and went, that's it. End of story. Collingwood said, we're out. No good pursuing on the back of that. And then here we are 7 days later. I sat there and watched him do that press conference today, and it was, need some clear air for Sam. Well, that's not what you said last week.
There's no way last Friday he was going in there knowing he's going to walk away in 3 or 4 days with that amount of passion. He's got great integrity, Alastair Clarkson. There's no way he's standing up and putting on a big act.
And a club that's been so brutal with players like Hodge, Mitchell, Lewis, Roughhead, are going to hand out 1.2 as a goodwill gesture.
Something's changed, guys. In the last few days. Now, reports in the paper, reports in the news in the last few hours that the players, there was meetings with the players and senior management, the CEO, some of the board members, that the players just weren't comfortable. There's too much anxiety going around. So what was their role in this?
That wasn't Luke Bruce's opinion when he was on the news 2 days ago. Said they'd sat down, they'd sorted it out, they got some clarity. Anyway, it's confusing. I wonder what Dermot Brereton, another massive name in the Hawthorn Footy Club history, one of the all-time greats. He's been good enough to join us as well. Derm, what do you make of it all, Derm?
Gentlemen. Disappointed that it had to play out so publicly, but... look, I made a few calls today when I heard the news, look back at it retrospectively, try and trace the timelines, and legitimately, to me, it's a case of someone along the line decided to change their mind on what they genuinely felt passionate about 7 days ago. In the ensuing 4 days or so after that, they changed their mind. And that's where it gets a little murky. So, that's pretty well what happened. People do that. I mean, you take Alastair Clarkson, a man of integrity, on face value, on his word, and you believe and you understand. And we believe that he 100% believed that he was going to coach Hawthorn next year and do the best he could for Sam Mitchell in terms of bringing him up to speed, passing on and imparting so much of that wisdom to Sam. And then somewhere in the next few days, he has a change of heart, changed his mind somewhere along the line.
What could happen? What could be so dramatic, Derm? I'm hearing what you're saying, and I suspect there's some truth in it. What could happen that could be... that is a quantum shift in the way that he was on the Friday to, if in fact he has changed his mind on Monday. What happens in the space of 3 or 4 days?
In the space of 3 or 4 days, when people know that you can be out on the ground, and I actually saw some vision... during the week of Sam out in the ground blowing the whistle and the likes. And if you're Alastair Clarkson and you're not the bloke in the middle blowing the whistle, you'd probably start to feel, how much hold do I really have on this team? And if you do have a great relationship with the person, i.e. Sam, you chat it through, and then you reach your decision. He probably just felt that was the right time to go, even though 7 days before he thought it was the right time to stay. And as I say, impart all that wisdom over the next 365 days.
Last one, mate. Are you embarrassed? Is this an embarrassing moment for the great Hawthorn Footy Club?
Look, you're not embarrassed, but it is something that you wish didn't play out publicly because, as I said, people change their minds all the time. The one thing I would say is that there's 18 teams. Every one of them has a power play, an inbuilt political structure. Every one of them has their own issues and their destabilising little moments. It's, you know, if it doesn't get out, you're viewed as a very strong club. Somebody along the lines has leaked, or somebody got it absolutely right. So make your mind up between the two.
Good on you, Derm. We'll listen to you tomorrow on the countdown, of course. Great of you to join us tonight. So, Dermot Brereton.
Tomorrow, we're not on.
All right, we won't listen to you tomorrow. We'll hear you at some stage through the course of the week on Fox Footy.
Okay. Cheers, let's have a good night.
And Ben Dixon and Jason Dunstall. Now, all right, you've heard them. You were spoken about. Are you any clearer?
No.
Give us your synopsis.
Clear as mud.
No, I mean, I think it could only be sort of one of three things then. So they've spoken about the handover 26 days ago, and if they offered Alastair Clarkson the opportunity to walk away with full entitlements, I think he would have taken it. He didn't. He called their bluff, and he said, I'm going to dig in and call it spite, call it whatever you like. He had 1 million+ reasons to do it. Now, the PR has either... one of three. The PR's become so bad that the board had no choice but to pull the trigger, or they really just wanted to sack him all along.
Or the Ben Dixon scenario.
Or there's the good...
throw yourself at the
and there's the goodwill. You've done amazing things for us.
That's where I'm leaning.
That's where you're leaning?
I don't profess to know. Brownie, I hope you're getting ready for St Kilda and Carlton because we've got to turn our mind to it at that stage, at some stage. But before we do that, let's go to the newsroom. And Ralphie, big football stories. None bigger than this.
No doubt. So Hawthorn is on the hook for the entire $900,000 salary that they have agreed to with Alastair Clarkson for 2022. And they will become the first club to officially pay the AFL's football department tax. Now, they'll spread it over 2 seasons. If they put it in the 2022 season, they would have had to pay $500,000 alone in tax, of course, apart from that salary. So they will spread it to 2022 and 23. By that time, they will, of course, have given Sam Mitchell, who have agreed to a new contract with, a significant pay rise. They'll have to, of course, replace Alastair Clarkson or the body count of that one. And so that will mean that they will be at least $100,000 over the football department cap in the next 2 years. So that is $75,000 of tax for both of those seasons. So at a minimum, they are paying $1.05 million for Alastair Clarkson, not to coach them. Now, Jeff Kennett talked today about the AFL setting precedents when Reece Shaw was paid out by the Roos. Now, the Roos couldn't get a cent of salary cap dispensation for that one, but certainly having checked in with the AFL, they are able to spread it over 2 seasons there. Look, I've spoken to football bosses today. They say if you want to fund your football department properly, you cannot be paying out money for a bloke that is not coaching you anymore. Now, there was some sort of tug of war in terms of the list management situation. Alastair Clarkson wanted to top up. He wanted to keep the senior players at that football club. Sam Mitchell wants to lead a youth-led recovery. So quite clearly, when the dust settles here, there are going to be players out there, whether it's Tom Mitchell, whether it's Jager O'Meara, whether it's Jack Gunston, who I would think will be much more likely to be on the trade table than they would have been with Alastair Clarkson. All that stuff will percolate out. But $1 million at minimum for a bloke who's not coaching them and the greatest coach of the modern era.
I want to hope it gets picked up. Ralphie, we'll talk to you throughout the course of the night, and if any developments come to hand, we'll get straight to you, boys.
Guys, can I? No, don't worry about it. We're going to the break.
No, after the break, you can.
After the break, going to load up.
First crack at it.
5 minutes.
We're going to get excited about Carly Kerner and Big Harry in the forward line for the first time in a long, long time, and this man up against Jacob Weitering. Lots to look forward to. We'll get to it coming up.